Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now what I've got whizzing around in front of me today is a Cerberus squad. These guys are for Konflikt 47, for the British Commonwealth Army, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them at the end of the video, which I don't ordinarily do, but these merit the attention. Now the painting's nice and simple, and the paints will all be listed in the description below, the same as always, so let's make it nice and quick. Let's get started. Okay, so let's start off with clearly the most important of the set, which is going to be the dogs. Now I started here by priming this fella with Brainmatter Beige. You could also use white, if you just happen to have it. I like the Brainmatter Beige because it's got a little bit of life to it. It's ever so slightly off-white, which means when we come back to highlight these guys to white dogs later, there's a little bit that we can bring it up to, it's handy. Now, something that I didn't do with the other two dogs, which in hindsight is probably a good idea, I have here a little bit of Brainmatter Beige from the pot. And though we have primed it in this color, I'm just going to quickly blast over the top of the dog, which is going to do two things. Anywhere that we might have missed, or the primer hasn't quite caught, of course we get that in our nice off-white shade. As well, it's going to give us a slightly different physical surface to paint over, which in hindsight, like I mentioned for the other dogs, they have a little bit of, it's not quite grainy, but it is visibly not as smooth as this guy's going to turn out. Obviously across the unit you're not going to notice it, but it's a good bit of practice to get into. Now once that's dried, we're going to have a slightly smoother finish for everything that we put over the top. Now, quick note up top, I really should have spent more time cleaning these guys up. Honestly, I got two blisters, the same Cerberus Team 1. One of them came from the previous run of Konflikt 47 stuff, and one was from the more recent, refreshed brand stuff. Now, this fella, he is from the older box, you can kind of tell, but I'm not unhappy with them. The newer miniatures are a little more nicely cast, I would say, so grab out the files. What I'm using here is Command Khaki, and we're just going to paint random doggy splotches. Make sure that you are going sort of through and over the webbing. Don't just stop at the edge, it'll look unnatural. And if you need inspiration on what color to paint certain parts of a dog, you can just follow along with the one that's on the website, or have a look at some real dogs. That's always fun. Now, for his little snoot, what I have is leopard stone skin. Just a little bit of water in my brush there. And what you could use here instead, any sort of pinkish skin tone will be fine. Just start from the muzzle, paint towards his nose, and a little bit under his mouth. And then, just a little bit of matte black. We can paint in the T shape of his nose. And I'm also going to use this, I will probably just dot a little bit of this across his face to fill in the eyes. The product page shows him with these glowing red eyes, and it's cool, but they are, they're genetically modified. They aren't rift units, so I don't know. I think more realistic eyes is my choice. Now that's the dog. There's not a lot to him. What I'm going to do now is his equipment. Likewise, there's not a lot of that. The little leather thing on his chest here, I'm going to use Tree Ancient. This will cover pretty well. The little metal knobbly bits on it are kind of a pain in the butt, but just take your time and you will defeat them. And then for the straps and webbing that he's wearing, the harness, I'm going to use Webbing Green. This one is from the British historical paint set, which, there are alternatives, but because I've got it, I'd like to use it. And then to finish off the base coats on this fella, I have a little bit of gunmetal, and I'm going to use this to paint in the buckles and the little dots, studs rather, on his chest piece. Now, of course, if you need to do any tidy up, you can do that before this point. What we're going to do now is to shade him. So what I've mixed up, this is strong tone and soft tone, and then the same again in Speedpaint Medium to give it a little bit more flow, and it won't stain quite as much. I did experiment a little bit with this. You can just use strong tone and the medium if you fancy in equal parts, and it will work fine. But adding just a little bit of soft tone here did make things a bit smoother, a bit warmer, a bit more lively, shall we say. So over everything, as you can see, I'm not really bucketing it on. I just want it in the recesses where it's going to add some depth to our doggo. And there we have it. If we're in a hurry, our dog is painted, you can varnish them up, chuck them on the table like this. But because you're only painting a handful of them, I would suggest it's not a huge amount of extra work just to brighten them up a little bit, spend a wee bit more time. So I'm going to go back to Brainmatter Beige and just highlight some of the meatier parts of the body. The wash is more or less going to tell you where to go with these highlights too, because the musculature in these enhanced dogs is pretty obvious. So leaving most of the shaded stuff in the recesses, you see this is very quick, just blasting around and brighten them up a bit. Then if you want to take that further, and I do recommend this is a good idea, grab yourself a little bit of matte white, and this is where we're going to finish off the unreasonably buff dog. So you want to leave a little bit more of the Brainmatter Beige now towards the flatter areas, and your white is going to highlight parts that you want to accentuate a bit more. Now for the brown spots and the little bit of pink around his nose, I'm just going to go back to the base coats in the same way as I did with the Brainmatter Beige, but I'm not going to do a second stage highlight for these, just enough to brighten them up a bit and give these some more shape again. I was about to say to highlight his uniform, and then realized, no. To highlight the little bit of webbing, what I have is some olive drab. You could also use something like necrotic flesh here if you wanted to. It's not really a right answer, just a lighter kind of army green will do the job. And there's the dog finished. Nice and quick. What I'm going to do is put him aside and I will varnish him later when I go and do the handler as well. So, speaking of the handler, now for the handler, I've begun by priming him in skeleton bone. You'll see there are a few bits I have missed, but the paint is going to stick to the miniature just fine. We'll start with the skin, and for this I'm going to use Agate skin as the base coat. For this fella, I am going to rock it through a little bit quicker than I did with the dogs, because I have done British uniform, a few times on the channels. So if you want a more in-depth look at what all the bits of the uniform actually are, I will pop a link to one of those videos in the description. For now, we're just going to blast through and get this fella painted. So working up in stages, we're now going to go to his uniform, and mid-battle dress is what we'll use here. You could start from dark battle dress if you preferred, but because we are going to shade this, I think it's going to be a little easier to start from the mid-tone. Now because I have already used it on the dogs, I have Tree Ancient here for the leather, and I'm going to pop this over his jerkin. Now if you wanted a darker one here, you could use Oak Brown instead, would be my suggestion. Now in reality, there's that grubby word, the strap on his helmet will probably be a very simple canvas. So I'm going to use Command Khaki again to paint this in. Bearing in mind we are painting a guy who's wrapped up in cuddle cloths to get torn to bits by murder dogs. So if you want to paint him with a leather chin strap, that's entirely up to you. Now there isn't very much of this visible on him. However, the webbing stuff that he is wearing, we're going to paint in webbing green. Now the bite guards, I am actually going to stick to skeleton bone for them, but because, like I said, and we've seen, the primer was a little bit patchy, I'm going to go in with some fresh stuff from the pot just to tidy up and solidify that color a bit. And now the leash that he's holding on to, which seems slightly hopeful, I'm going to use a little bit of leather brown. I have already hit it with that Tree Ancient from earlier, but just to make it stand out a bit, a little more interesting, leather brown, or even something lighter maybe, might be a good idea, but we'll see how this turns out first. Now for the black leather that he's got holding on the cushions, what I'm going to use here, this is Strap Grey. Now this one is from the German paint set, but is available separately from the Army Painter as well. Well worth picking up because it's a nice deep, just off black as it dries. Nothing stopping you though if you did just want to use black. It's also perfectly reasonable. And I'm going to paint in his boots with this as well. Alright, now for his helmet I'm going to use Midnight Olive. This one actually comes from the John Blanche range rather than the historicals, but it is pretty much a perfect sort of British/Allied green. Woodland Camo is a little bit lighter than this, but can also work in a pinch. I would just pop a darker shade over the top of it once the first one had dried, but this is perfect. And then last of the base coats, same as with the dogs, is going to be some gunmetal. Now once I'm finished with this, what I'm going to do is cruise around and just tidy up the base coats that I need to, and then he'll be ready for his wash. Now here to wash this fella, I'm going to use just Strong Tone and Speedpaint Medium in equal parts. You could mix in a little bit of the soft tone as well, but with all of these being basically darker colors, and we're also not looking for an off-white like we were on the dogs, this is going to work a little better, I would suggest. So same principle here, chuck it over everything and making sure that it is getting into the recesses. Any big pools, shift them around, the usual, and we'll give this fella about half an hour to dry. Alright, there we go. Loads of shading, and it hasn't dulled everything down too much. If you wanted to, you could just varnish them, pop them on the table, same as with the dogs, but let's take things a little bit further. What I'm going to start with here is some fair skin. This one's also from the British paint set, and it is a little bit lighter than Barbarian Flesh. So what I'm going to do is cover over most of his skin with this, and leave just a little bit of the shaded stuff in the recesses for shape. Now, if you do want to take that any further, remember you've got leopard stone skin from when you were painting your dogs, so just a tiny wee dot of that, and places like the tip of his nose, backs of his knuckles, just enough to give it a little bit more shape. Now we're really just painting for the heck of it. And still playing with colours that we already have, a little bit of Command Khaki, just on the edges of the leash here, make that stand out a bit more. Now to highlight his uniform, what I've mixed up here on my palette is 2 dots of mid battle dress with 1 dot of the light battle dress. And this is going to cover pretty well. It will look lighter than it is as it goes on, and you just want to use it to pick out the larger, flatter curves of the uniform. Leave the shaded stuff behind. If you do find it a little tricky to highlight when you've still got the shine from that wash on, what you can do is to actually varnish the miniature first, then highlight it. But a bit of practice, and you won't find it too difficult at this stage. Now, if you want to take that any further, you can just mix in a tiny wee dot more of the light battle dress to the same mix. This is where you want to start paying attention just to your edges, bits like epaulettes and similar, hard creases, just to give it a little bit more oomph. Now for the bite guards, what I have is some ancient stone. You could even use, I think it's Bony Spikes is the next one up, but this is a nice sort of ivory color to finish off some of the edges of the foam here. If you do want to highlight any of the black straps, and this is really getting into the realm of just fussing for the sake of it, but a little bit of deep grey, and be careful with this, because you don't want to add very much. This will very quickly make your highlighted black just look grey. So little bits of this, and then the last of the highlights I'm going to bother with, it's going to be fur brown, and just a little bit of this on the jerkin. Now this I would suggest thin it down a little bit more than you usually would until it's slightly translucent. And you'll see I've only got a tiny amount of it on my brush at a time. I don't want to lose control of this if I can avoid it. If I do, I can just go back to some Tree Ancient from earlier and paint over any excessive highlighting I've done. What I'm going to do when I'm finished with this is to take them outside, hit them with a matte varnish spray, and then go ahead and base them. And the recipe for that will be in the description, same as always. So let's get a look at our handler here and his doggos once they are all complete. And so there at last, our Cerberus unit is complete. Now, as I mentioned, they are a little bit rough. I really should have spent more time on cleanup and prep work, but I'm happy enough with the end result there. Now, one thing I do want to touch on, and it's something that I think this might actually be the only time I've ever done it, is to talk about the unit on the tabletop and the actual game rules for them, because the Cerberus units are incredible, and they don't come up when anybody's been talking about the recent, the totem core that are coming, the plastic zombies. So for 107 points, what you get in a Cerberus unit is 3 dogs and a guy. The 3 dogs all have tough fighters, and they have 1 penetration in combat. The whole unit has a run move of 16 inches, so that's a ridiculous charge range, and that's pretty handy. As well as being fearless, which means if they get into combat and they don't win the first round, they fight another round immediately. They are going to take a pretty decent chunk out of anything they end up in combat with. But that's not why you take them. For 107 points, what you get is a unit that means they have the alert special rule. No enemy unit can set up using infiltrators within 18 inches of your army. Now that's not just the Cerberus unit, that's the entire force. So in 1,000 points, they're pretty helpful. In 1,500 points, they become indispensable because things like the Totem Core, the Moraz Ghoul from the Soviet side, Japanese Ghost Warriors, American Paragons, Roberta Wells, nothing can start within 12 inches of them, or close to 12 inches rather. They have to infiltrate 18 inches further away, which means almost all of those infiltrating units that rely on starting close and getting into combat or getting within walloping range really quickly, you are going to get a second round of shooting at them almost no matter what, for the cost of a unit of dogs. These are indispensable. I think they really are one of the most useful things going in the British Commonwealth Army list at the moment. Like I said, I don't normally talk about army stuff like real rules on the channel, but these guys, man, they're worth it. If you've got somebody who's crowing and go, I've ordered a whole bunch of the new zombies, you ruin their day. You fix their little red wagon, go get a unit of dogs. So, that all aside, thank you goes out to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, and all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue and doggos, which includes my gorgeous producers who are showing up on screen now. Thank you very much for your support, folks, and for bearing with me while I have a bit of a blatter. So any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the old box below. My Blue Sky and Instagram are both linked down there too. So thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.